so we thought, okay, second Sunday of the month, we'll invite someone up to share for part of the message time. And so we got to hear from Courtney last month. We got to hear from John Gasper the month before that. And everybody's story is a little different, right? Obviously, God's been at work in our lives in different ways. And the way that we tell those stories are different. In my mind, I'd kind of pictured, oh, okay, so somebody can share for half the message time, maybe 15 minutes, and I'll do like a little message that connects with it somehow and whatever. Well, this month is Mitch Peters. He's going to be sharing his story with us. And he's prepared. He had typed it all up. He prepared it all. And when he sent it to me, he said, now, just so you know, it's about 25 to 30 minutes. And he said, I could cut it way back, or you could just pray and do communion at the end. And I read it, and I thought, okay, Mitch, no, let's just hear the story the way you already wrote it. So yeah, we get to hear Mitch share some of his story. Come on up, Mitch. Some of you know Mitch. He's been a part of our church now for several years. I'm not sure how many years. And is currently serving on our board and is doing all kinds of great things in the community. But I'm excited for you to hear some of Mitch's story today.
Thank you. I want to thank Pastor Rich for asking me and for the board for letting me. So this is my story. It was the spring of 1988, and I was homeless, laying on the floor of an abandoned building, surrounded by the filth and desecration of my addiction, recently stabbed for the 4th time in my life. At the age of 31, I was just beginning to come to terms with the reality of what my life looked like. And a vision came to me that dark night, and I realized that if I didn't make some drastic changes in my life, that I was not going to survive, that I was never going to see my 6-year-old son again, I was never going to make it back to Indiana. The Holy Spirit touched my heart on that dark and desperate night. And it changed my life forever. It's always been amazing to me how in those desperate times of our lives, we search for answers and solutions as to where we went wrong and what we can do to change our lives. We search faced with life and death circumstance, during extreme illness, incarceration, failed relationships, or any emotional or spiritual collapse, we invariably find ourselves turning to God for answers we so desperately seek. Perhaps that is what brought you here, a search for God, a better understanding of our Lord Jesus and how he works in our lives. I came to Christ in desperation because in spite of the changes God wrought in my life in 1988, I failed to appreciate the significance of that moment. I failed to make God a priority or have any recognition of God. Once he provided me the relief that I sought, I did not even consider God in that moment or the significance of his love and grace. Maybe that's your story. Maybe that's familiar to you. I've sinned, suffered the consequences over and over again of my actions, finding myself desperate and alone at times, suicidal, in extreme emotional pain, and yet, through it all, God still seeks a relationship with me. He still seeks me out, the one. It's essential for me personally to recognize that what I think is important, what I perceive the reality of my existence to be in any given moment, may or may not be true. And no matter what I believe, people do what they do for their own reasons. And I may not know or understand why. And it may have nothing to do with me. And the funny thing is, God works in the same way. He has his own plan, as he told us in Joshua. While I may think that I discern his reasoning, God's reality may be entirely different than my limited perception. I may believe that I'm in a perfectly stable relationship. I may believe that my use of drugs is acceptable behavior, only to find myself desperately addicted, homeless, hopelessly alone. I may believe that all of the activities in my life, hunting, work, archery, golf, softball, surgeries now, motorcycles, or saving the world one addict at a time, are the most important things in my life. And that's just not true. Neglecting God, my family, or myself to the point where I find myself in critical failure and chaos. Yet those relationships, activities, and behaviors were the priorities in my life at times, taking precedence and importance over everything, including any relationship with God. So it was equally important to recognize that what I think is important will change as I reflect, progress, and mature in this Christian process. My own life beginning as a child is an example of misguided priorities. We lived like gypsies. My mother was a single parent and an addict. We moved a lot. From the 4th to the 9th grade, I was in 6 different schools in 6 years, in 3 different states, in 3 different family groups. That's dysfunctional. How am I going to connect with anything? We lived a dysfunctional and secret lifestyle. I never really felt comfortable or loved by anyone. And the consequence was I became antisocial. I hung out with the wrong crowd, learned the wrong life skills. My generation is the reason we have locking ignitions. Turned to drugs, violence, and crime as a way of life, and abandoned my brief exposure to a Christian life that I may have received through my grandparents as a child. I mean, I was baptized. I was confirmed in the church. I sang in the choir. I did all of that as a child. I engaged in my first burglaries at 7 or 8. I remember when I burglarized the local gas station, I had to climb up on the counter to reach what it was I thought that I needed in that instance. I wasn't even big enough to get up there. I became addicted to drugs at a young age, first injecting drugs at the age of 15. I used on a daily basis, seeking to change my life's circumstance, to cope with what my life looked like. Living in addiction, domestic violence, it was not pleasant. Addiction became my way of life, my priority, and escaping my reality. I was lost, abandoned, fearful, ashamed, all of the negative thoughts and behaviors, which just led to more drugs, violence, and crime. Expelled from school in the 9th grade. Well, at 16, I left home and hitchhiked to Florida. And I came back to give school one more chance. And I lasted a couple weeks. So early in the 9th grade, I was out. I was in trouble with the law, seriously addicted. So it was Vietnam. The day I turned 17, I joined the Navy. And back then, you did not need a high school diploma. But it was just another pattern of escape and survival, always seeking something that eluded me. I got my GED in the Navy, completed my active duty, transferred to the reserves. Then I went to college and law school on the GI Bill, married, divorced, kids, went to jail a few times, not for the first time, continued to use drugs and alcohol, entered the first of 4 treatment centers, inpatient treatment centers, all from 1976 to 1986. All of these events failed to cause a shift in my priorities, and nothing changed because nothing changed. I hadn't returned to God. There's nothing attractive about living under a bridge, eating out of a dumpster, repeatedly being incarcerated, or living the lifestyle of addiction. Yet that's who I became, a homeless, hopeless addict living on the streets of Miami, at times washing dishes for $20 a day and a couple meals, with a law degree and a drug habit. And I was happy for the work. Things began to shift when I laid on that floor dying in 1988. God truly intervened, and looking back in my life, I can see multiple times throughout it where God was there intervening in every instance. He had plans for me. In that moment of clarity, he began a change within me, and although it took some decades to come to fruition, I ultimately arrived here. Found what I was always seeking, a new direction in life. To some degree, personal transformation, the personal change necessary to discover Christ, requires an urgent need born of hopeless desperation, at least in my case. I had strayed from Christ and only called on God when life's circumstance became dire and fearful. Self-examination revealed the instances where his grace and forgiveness saved my life and preserved my mind. I never realized the necessity of having Jesus in my life in order to effectuate substantial and lasting change. How ironic is it that when we believe everyone has abandoned us, family, friends, everyone, and the only one left who loves us unconditionally is God, who has bestowed upon us grace and redemption, we so readily blame that loving God for the consequences of our own life choices and circumstance. We don't accept any personal responsibility, we just blame God. I think we'll skip a little of this. God never abandoned me. He waited lovingly and patiently to bring me back where I belong. I'm humbled by the fact that God's disciples never gave up on me. And I realize today, God's not paying me back for something I did or didn't do. He's bringing me back for what I can and will do in the future. This is God's plan, not mine. How can I not carry his message of love and hope to others who are as hopeless and forsaken as I once believed that I was? Christ has provided me with peace. How can I not share that peace with others who are in need? Bringing the hope to the hopeless and oppressed. Look at the life of Peter in Matthew 16:8. Jesus states, this is King James Version, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." He's an apostle of Jesus who authored 2 books in the New Testament, later designated as the first pope of the Catholic Church. But his life, Peter's life in the Bible, is full of failure and despair. Yet he persevered. He continued in his Christian faith, becoming the rock which Jesus foretold. Matthew 14 describes how Peter failed to walk on the water. And Christ rebuked him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? As he sinks into the sea. In Luke 22:31, Christ prays that Peter's faith not fail, and Peter vows his allegiance unto death. And yet Christ predicts Peter's denial of him 3 times. And in Luke 21:51 and Mark 14:47, Christ at his preordained betrayal in the garden, Peter, having fallen asleep 3 times, instead of praying, uses his sword to cut off the ear of a servant of the high priest, and then Christ heals that ear. And then, of course, Peter denies Christ 3 times, Luke 22. And upon realizing the truth in despair, wept bitterly. The story of Peter and his failures and despair demonstrates there's always hope. We never give up on ourselves or others within our community, within our church, throughout. Our failures in life do not define us. They make us stronger in discovering and achieving our Christian faith. From these desperate beginnings, Peter went on to accept the Great Commission, Matthew 28:16 through 20, and became the rock upon which Jesus founded the church. My father told me, my mother and father gave me a lot of advice as a kid, I guess. Mom told me, if you can't be good, be careful. So I was careful. But my father told me that I didn't have to live my life like a country song. That was one of the 2 or 3 things he told me. And sometimes I wish that I hadn't, but I'm still grateful that I did. We'll do a song at the end today, even though we haven't really practiced it much, but we'll do the best we can. And I want to thank you, Pastor Rich and the board, for asking me to share today. I appreciate it. God bless you.